Add to stream. Here we go. We're on multiple platforms here today, friends, and we're having a conversation about experiencing difficult emotions, and how can you experience an emotion without getting overly identified with it. So I was just saying to the folks on Perform Live that to be a spiritual person, to be a resilient person, to be somebody who can thrive in all circumstances and ultimately persevere whatever you're facing, we can't do this thing that we refer to as spiritual bypassing. It's tempting to want to avoid what's happening, or to sugarcoat it, or to pretend that everything is okay, right? And there are a lot of people in the quote unquote spiritual world who do that, right? Who just say, yeah, everything's fine, all is well, and they put the emotions somewhere deep down inside and they avoid what's going on. But what I was saying is, one of the pillars of the radical resilience process is unconditional acceptance, which is really the ability to say yes to whatever's happening, which may seem like an impossibly difficult task, but it is a necessary part of the healing process. So there's an old adage that comes from Buddhist principles that says, in life, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. And suffering is resistance to what is. And that's really what we're talking about here. Resisting what is, or trying to say no to it, or avoid it, or numb it out. And to be a truly resilient person, to be a truly spiritual being, and somebody who can persevere against all odds, one does have to have enough courage to lean into what's difficult, to say yes to whatever is happening in the moment, to surrender that moment, right? Maybe to something higher than yourself, and simply lean in. Now, how do we do that without getting overly identified with it? I mean, that really is the big question, right? So that is sort of the big inquiry, I would say, of almost all spiritual traditions is, how can I be in this world without necessarily being of it? Which means a recognition that I am a human being having a human experience, but that I'm also a spiritual being having a spiritual experience, and that I can have human emotions, and I can have human ego structures and a human personality without getting identified with it to the degree that I feel like I am those emotions, or I am that personality. So as many of you know, I studied the Enneagram as one of the tools that I utilize in my work. And the Enneagram is not necessarily meant to hold you in a box, right? I was participating today in the Global Enneagram Conference, and Russ Hudson said that the Enneagram is not meant to put you in a box. Like, your Enneagram type isn't meant to put you in a box. As a matter of fact, it's there to show you the box you're in and then show you the way out. So that, for me, is probably the most effective way of learning how to be in this world, learning how to be a human being with human ego constructs and emotions and traumas and responses to those traumas, without getting so identified with it that we think we are those traumas, or we are that personality. So I can't give you a quick fix. That's not what this is. I can't give you like a Band-Aid to this issue. But what I can say is that the way I have found to be able to do this practice of being in the world but not of it, leaning in and saying yes, not spiritual bypassing, but yet not getting overly identified with the emotions, is to recognize that an emotion is really just energy in motion, that it has a beginning, middle, and an end, that you can experience it and really feel it on a visceral level, but then also just describe what it is without getting too steeped in it so that you become that emotion. So it's the awareness that, like, yes, I'm having an experience, but I am not that experience. What I really am is the being that is observing that experience. And it's the ability to lean in, to say yes, to not avoid or pretend that everything is okay, to not spiritually bypass, but rather to just say, I'm a yes to this. This is okay. So that's my tidbit for this week's Fireside Chat. Would love to hear from you. I'm seeing Amanda Perez on YouTube saying, hi, beautiful. Hi, right back to you, my dear. So great to have you here. So if anyone else is joining us on the other platforms, be it Facebook or YouTube or LinkedIn, Rohit, thanks, buddy, for being here. Really appreciate the love and the gift. If somebody wants to hop up on stage from Perform Live and have a conversation about this, it's a pretty big topic, right? And we're talking about big spiritual stuff here. It's not an easy thing. It's a concept that's easy to talk about. Like I can sit here and say, yeah, just experience the emotion without getting overly identified in it. But as somebody who's gone through some pretty big stuff in my life and had some pretty intense emotions, I can tell you that in the heat of it, it's not always an easy thing to do. But what we have the opportunity to do is to make our way back to a place of presence through an awareness of the body, through the intelligence of the body, through an awareness of the breath and the intelligence and the life force that the breath brings, through our ability to experience whatever that emotion is on a visceral level, and then to observe it, right? Just kind of watch it happen without getting too steeped in it. To say, okay, I'm having an experience of anxiety, for example, without sitting there and saying to myself, I'm having a panic attack. You can simply say, I'm having an experience of the energy that we call anxiety. What does that feel like in my body? Where do I experience that in my body? What does that sensation actually feel like? And then as I bring my attention and my awareness to it, a really magical thing happens, which is that I come into the here and now without spinning out about the future or obsessing about the past. I get to be present. And it's through that presence that we come to a place of grounding and have the ability to recognize that we are not of that emotion. We don't have to get overly identified with it, that we can let it run its course. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. We can stay grounded through the breath and then see it through to the other side. And I will say that the other really effective practice of doing this is through yoga, right? On the four corners of your yoga mat, you have the opportunity to experience all the discomfort of being in a posture that your body is going, what? About, and simply breathe through it and be with it, right? So without running away from it or trying to come out of the posture as soon as possible. You know, maybe you've heard a yoga teacher say, the posture doesn't really begin until you want to get out, right? It's once you want to get out of the posture that it's really begun doing its work on you. It's that practice of letting yourself sit in the fire and let that fire truly transform and transmute and alchemize what's happening with you so that you can ultimately come out the other side of it with more wisdom, with a greater level of understanding, with a more expansive heart, right? And the ability to recognize who you really are, the essence of who you are. So that's what I got for you, friends. If anyone wants to comment or have a little discussion about this topic, I'm here for you. Always available to do some flash coaching for you guys here on the Fireside Chats on Wednesdays. It's a great opportunity to have a little dialogue. And if not, it's all good. I can just leave you with that to kind of sit with it and marinate on it a little bit. And I'll see you this week. Now we're moving our yoga classes from Wednesdays to Tuesdays. So if you've been tuning in with us on Perform Live for the weekly yoga classes, those weekly yoga classes are moving to Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. On all the other platforms, you're going to see that on the socials. So we'll see you Tuesday at 5 p.m. for our all levels yoga class. And then back here again, Fridays at 2:30 Pacific Standard Time for our Fireside Chats. Apologies for my being a couple minutes late on the other platforms, had some tech issues. Apologies to my Perform Live folks for having to start the broadcast in my vehicle. Sometimes you just got to do what you got to do. But with that, I'm going to wish you lots of love and light and aloha, and have a safe and fun weekend. Talk to you soon. Namaste.